Now down to some presentations, and we have here the Bureau was arranged, I think, for Michelle Davenport, accompanied maybe by Marty Garrity, to be here, and so we recognize them to come and present to us information about redistricting. Obviously, a lot of people are interested in the redistricting issue, and people obviously that are viewing this committee meeting, they've got interest in it too. And so I urge all of the stakeholders, if you're here in the room or if you're watching the meeting, reach out to your local legislator to get a conversation going. And if you have input on that, I'm sure that members of the committee would be happy to represent that at the table for you. That being the case, Ms. Davenport, I'd like for both you and Marty to state your name and who you represent for the record, and then have you give us a brief on the redistricting process.
Happy to, sir. Happy to. My name is Michelle Davenport. I'm one of the legislative drafting attorneys with the Bureau of Legislative Research.
Marty Garrity with the Bureau of Legislative Research.
All right, thank you very much. You're recognized.
Thank you, sir. As you may know, the General Assembly has been delegated the responsibility for United States congressional redistricting. This can get a little bit confusing because the legislature is not delegated the responsibility for actually redistricting the seats of the Arkansas Senate and House. That is left to the Board of Apportionment.
Put your mic a little closer.
Absolutely. I can take this off if that's going to make it a little bit easier.
I don't know if it's picking you up all that much, so I want to make sure people can actually hear you.
Absolutely. In doing so, this is based on 72101, and the General Assembly is responsible for the 4 congressional districts. We do that using the United States Census data. As you may have heard, redistricting is one of those issues that seems to be challenged a lot. I did a very brief look, and from 2010 to 2020, the NCSL, the National Conference of State Legislatures, identified 49 major cases challenging some part of redistricting. A lot of those cases are not regarding the congressional redistricting. They actually identify things that are happening within each state's redistricting process. The most recent challenge to Arkansas's congressional redistricting took place on the 1991 redistricting, and that was the case of Turner v. Arkansas. And the court found that there was no violation of the Equal Protection 14th, 15th Amendment or the equal voting rights in that congressional redistricting plan. In doing so, and in looking at congressional redistricting, the federal rule really breaks down to one simple concept, and that is one person, one vote. This is borne out through quite a few United States Supreme Court cases, and while one person, one vote sounds simple on the front end, it's often hard to make happen in reality because you have to be allowed some small deviation from the precise population equality in those congressional voting districts. A state, when they're looking at these congressional deviations, they must show that any deviation is justified for a specific governmental reason that is allowed. So, the big question is how do we get there? And how does this committee get there in this process? Typically, the census data is available on the federal level in early January. We would then look to be seeing that census data turned over to the states in early February. Unfortunately, we are not in that position this year. At this time, we know that the census data has not been provided on the December 31st deadline that was originally provided. And at this time, we do not have an estimated time or date of when that population census data is going to be provided to the states. That puts the states in a little bit of an awkward position because any work that's done prior to receiving that population data will be based on old information and old data sources. But what we're going to be looking at, and actually there's a training tomorrow with Shelby Johnson of the Department of Information Systems. The Board of Apportionment uses the Department of Information Systems to procure the computer software program that actually does the heavy lifting of helping draw the maps. Inputting that census data and putting it into a format that everyone can make use of. That process is underway. The RFP has already been let and put out for publication, and I'm sure we'll receive more information tomorrow from him on the exact status of that process. Once DIS picks the software, the Bureau will utilize the same type of software so that there's no questions that all of the information can communicate between the two systems. Once we've received that data, members of the General Assembly will be able to meet with Bureau staff, specifically Lori Bowen of our Research and Policy Analysis Division, will be able to work with the members to develop each one of those maps that show their particular, distribution of how they think the population should be distributed in those congressional districts. Once the member approves that map, that information will be transmitted to me to draft a bill. And these bills are going to look just like your normal bills during session. And if you're interested, you've got two great examples in existing code where you look at the congressional districts. You'll notice the first district has some whole counties, and then it also breaks down by voting precincts or districts, voting districts, and that was to reach these equal population proportions. However, if you look at District 2, you'll notice it's actually all full counties. Those were some of the decisions that were made in the last redistricting, and I've looked at that will probably be something that this General Assembly may have to look at as well. Once a member approves the draft bill as created, it's filed just as any other bill. They would be referenced and reviewed to state agencies, to this committee. A member does not have to be a member of state agencies to request a map and a bill that would set congressional districts. That's available to any member of the General Assembly. Once that's done, this committee would follow its normal process in determining how they would like to proceed with adoption of those bills. And there are a lot of court cases, again, that deal with specific elements of redistricting. However, I will put a caveat that a lot of those deal with the work that the Board of Apportionment will be doing on the state level, not necessarily the federal congressional level cases. But that's a very general overview, but if there's any questions or anything else I can assist with on kind of the high level, I'm happy to do so.
Okay. And members, be happy to entertain questions, and it's a good spot to mention for the future when we're really getting in here and got testimony. Just like normal committee, try to get Maddie's attention, and she'll make sure that I'm getting everybody on list. If you begin to have questions pile up, I can see most everybody here, even Senator English and Bledsoe, though I can only see their heads, basically. But so I saw people looking at me, but I didn't see a first question. So is there, Senator Ballinger, you're recognized. Thank you very much. Please use your mic so the people can hear that are watching.
Thank you. Do we have any kind of estimates or projections, like numbers? And my guess is that we'll get the numbers in plenty of time to do business, but if some people wanted to look at it and start working on it, are there estimates that we feel like are updated more than the 2010 census numbers?
We don't have any, or Senator Ballinger, we don't have any of those numbers. It's all based on 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so to try to create any maps, I think without the official numbers is going to be hard to do.
Okay.
I will just make mention, and I don't, obviously we can't depend on it in any way, but I believe that there are some third-party non-governmental entities out there that are doing projections, and they're looking at things, but it's nothing that we can hang our hat on. I won't even attempt to begin to name any, so as not to feel that I'm encouraging anybody on anything. But I think if you go out there, you'll find there's some different entities that have got some projection information out there, which might just be interesting to look at, because a lot of the information that Michelle has stated to us here today, I think they include, so that it can help you get a feel for it. And I don't mind also saying, because I'm really not mentioning any names or anything, but you can draw maps on some of those programs. They're third parties, and you can begin to look at that and see what might happen if you draw one way or another, and what that might look like. And so, members, there's plenty out there to keep you keep you busy if you wanted to begin looking at that. Any other questions for staff? Senator Tucker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Michelle. And I know you said that there are a bunch of factors in some of those cases. Most of them have to do with state legislative seats rather than federal seats, but I'm curious where in the process we're going to learn about that. Do you discuss those with the member when they're putting the bill together, or when there's a presentation to the committee about what the districts may be? Will we receive a briefing then about the one person, one vote requirements, or how does that work?
We can do it how this committee wants to. I don't know if once this process begins, we can provide a more in-depth legal analysis of that, or in addition to those members that might not be here, we'll probably do a summary just to hand them when we give them their maps. So it'll probably be both if this committee so wishes.
I'll just state just for my own, getting feedback and reading some about it. Obviously, most of the cases and litigation is dealt with those state legislative districts. And I think you said 91 was the last time that we had an issue with that. I just urge us to be prudent about things that the committee says and does so that you don't put yourself in a situation where somebody tries to use you as a reason to somehow impede the process. And so that means that we just don't. I would encourage you not to over politicize commentary related to us doing the job of getting this done. It needs to be finished for us to be able to proceed on and move forward. So any other questions from anyone? I think Senator Ballinger may have another one.
So do we know that, whether the Department of GIS would have, I just can't imagine us not having it. In fact, I thought I saw a document that showed the projected change in each district. So if it's something that you guys don't have, and I'm not sure exactly, I can reach out to the GIS department, but I'm curious as to, there surely is somewhere where they have some sort of information where they can project, how things are changing.
And Senator Ballinger, that may be some of the information we receive tomorrow.
Okay.
That we're doing a training with Mr. Johnson to see what information is there. I know the Bureau does not maintain that information in the interim. Again, as you said, another state agency may have some interim census data, but that would not be anything we have or are able to map off of.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
I'm just curious for the purposes of the committee. I know 3 of us were here during the last census. How many of our committee members were here during the last process in the legislature? So Senator Bledsoe and myself and Senator English, I thought that might be the case. I wasn't sure if you might have already been in the House down there, but it was an interesting process, and that's all I'll say on that. But it's one that's very important, and I think that the committee, of all the things that we do up here, this is probably one of the most important jobs that we have, is making sure that Arkansas has good, equally balanced, as best we possibly can, congressional districts, and so I'm looking forward to that process. Any other questions for Michelle or Marty at this time? We appreciate you being here, and the training, I did want to ask on the training part, is that just a staff internal training you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson offered an opportunity for staff to come over and look at some of the base level geographic information on how it's put together, the way that it works. He'll probably use some of the information from the 2011 redistricting process on how that physically went into the system and comes out, so that we're more familiar with exactly what the outputs are going to look like, so that we can be ready to be able to draft the bills expeditiously.
And I'm sorry, since I asked that question, will his office be the one actually producing the maps for you, or will you all be producing maps internally?
We will actually have the ability to produce the maps internally. And that's one reason we're doing so in a coordinated effort of training, is so that, because this is not something that our office does on a daily basis, that we actually have an opportunity to work with those who are in the geographic mapping systems and are familiar with the data. And the program itself will be very instrumental in being able to do, and I'm assuming this will be the first of many different training opportunities that we will have as staff so that we can utilize the software once it's fully selected in the most efficient manner.
I hate to ask the question because I'm not expecting you to be a history expert. But I think, I'm trying to think here, I believe that Arkansas had an extra congressional district as late as the 1930s or 40s, maybe, I can't recall. Do you know when we lost a congressional seat?
I do not know the dates, but I know that those congressional reapportionment, there's not been any indication from the information from NCSL that Arkansas would be affected by gaining any
Correct.
kind of population reapportionment. That's not been mentioned in any of the information I've seen
That's right.
coming up.
Members, you can go out and look in that. I think it was probably mid-20th century, I believe, when we lost a congressional seat and went to the 4 that we have now. And I think based on information I've read, that the 2 net large losers in the country are California and New York that are losing congressional seats. And Florida and Texas seem to be the big gains. And then there's some in between, but it's definitely New York and California losing some seats. So thank you. It's going to be an interesting process. Appreciate you being here. And with that, members,